All right, everybody, welcome back to the library. We're going to do another lesson today for you guys. Before we get started here, I'd like to do a little warm up with you. If you look at your screen, it says, I want you to think of one or two people who you believe have changed the world. Okay, they can be from history or modern times, and I just want you to list one or two of them in the chat. Oops, go back about that. Okay, so Elias says Princess Diana, Mother
Mother
Teresa.
Teresa, I was going to think Mother Teresa as well. Um, Martin Luther King,
Yeah, very good. That's actually who we're going to be talking about today.
and let's see who else. Gandhi,
Oh, there you go. That's good.
and I don't know how to to spell his name
That's all
properly.
right. So the reason I had you do that is because our lesson today is going to be on biographies. And one thing that biographies do is they allow us to learn about significant people, either modern day people or people from history. So for our objectives today, we are going to be learning what the characteristics of biographies are. And then with all the activities that we're going to be doing, we're also going to be developing our critical thinking skills and comprehension and creative expression through reading and discussing, and then eventually creating an illustrated timeline. Sorry, I got too many things on my screen. So the standard, since we're in the library, we are wanting to learn something that's a library standard. So the library standard that we are learning about today is that the library encourages students to read a variety of literature and information, for information and for pleasure. So what are biographies? That's what we'll start at. So biographies are an account of someone's life. They usually are going to talk specifically about events that have shaped that person in some way, that have led them to whatever it is that's made them significant. They highlight a person's achievements, the challenges they've faced, and their importance to the world. Biographies are nonfiction, uh, because we're learning about real people. And then there's also something called an autobiography. So if somebody writes their own biography, then that's called an autobiography. So the best way to learn about what a biography is to read one. So in our read along today, I'm going to be reading a biography about Martin Luther King called I Am Martin Luther King Jr. As I'm reading the book, I want you to think about two important events. They're going to go over lots of events from Martin Luther King's life, but I want you to think about two important events from Martin Luther King's life, as we're going through the book. You're going to use those events later on when we're doing our activity, which is going to be to create an illustrated timeline. And then also, I want you to think about those characteristics of biographies that we talked about, telling about the person's life, highlighting their 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 challenges and achievements, and see if you can recognize that in the book that we're reading. Okay, and then we'll use that later on in our activity. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you guys can see the book. Okay. All right. So here's our book here. Okay. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm gonna turn my screen so I can read from the. So I Am Martin Luther King Jr. by Brad Meltzer and illustrated by Christopher Eliopoulos. I am Martin Luther King Jr. When I was little, I used to get into a lot of accidents. One day, my little brother hit me in the head with a baseball bat. Two other times, I mistakenly got knocked over by a car. Another day, I tumbled over our banister, then bounced through an open door into the basement. And then it's showing his brother here saying, "Whoa, amazing fall. You okay?" "I'm okay." No matter how many times I fell, I kept getting back up. Even before I could read, I knew I liked books. My dad always talked about how I kept a lot of books around me. I used to tell my parents, when I grow up, I'm going to get me some big words. There is a power in words. Big words were in my future. Just as I'm reading, I think it's kind of cute for the pictures that he's a little boy with a mustache. Funny. When I was 6 years old, one of my best friends was a boy whose father owned a store across the street. "Tag, you're it. No, you're it. No, you're it. No, you're it." My friend was white and I was black. It didn't matter to us. We would play games and have fun together. But when we started going to school, everything changed. He went to a school where all the kids were white. I went to a school where everyone was black. Soon after, he told me, "I can't play with you anymore." "Why?" "My dad said so. He doesn't want us being friends." "But why? You're one of my best friends, aren't you?" "Aren't you?" I didn't understand. It didn't make any sense. At dinner, my parents explained, "It's because you're black and he's white." I was so mad that day. How could someone treat me differently just because of the color of my skin? I wanted to hate my friend and his father. But my parents told me to do the opposite, that I should love my friend even though he hurt me. They taught me that it's better to have more love in your life than more hate. Then my mother taught me one of the most important lessons of all. You are as good as anyone. You must never feel that you are less than anyone else. I wanted to believe it, but every day I saw the opposite. I saw you could be treated unfairly just because of the color of your skin. If you were white, you went to a good school with great playgrounds and plenty of books. If you were black, your school was small, sometimes with no desks or even windows. Check it out. Playground. Check it out. Where's our playground? It wasn't just the schools. Black people had to use different water fountains, different elevators, even different bathrooms. In fact, on a hot day when everyone wanted ice cream, if you were white, you could sit at the counter and eat from a nice dish. But I was black. If they served me at all, it was through a side window, and they put my ice cream in a flimsy paper cup. "This ice cream is perfect." "This ice cream is melted." It got even worse when I was 14. I had just won a speech competition. My speech was about being fair to all people. I was so excited. Then on the bus ride home, a few white people got on board. "You need to give up your seat to the whites." At first, I stayed put. It didn't seem fair, but my teacher convinced me to move. We spent the rest of the ride standing and getting tossed in every direction. It was the angriest I'd ever been. Every day, this is what life was like. Black people were treated terribly. The only question was, what could I do about it? At the age of 15, I started college. At 19, I became a minister and entered seminary school to study religion. Over those years, I read the works of Henry David Thoreau and Mahatma Gandhi. Thoreau taught me about civil disobedience, how an evil system could be changed without violence. Gandhi opened my mind to the power of love. Nonviolent resistance. What's that? It's using love and peaceful methods to change unfair things in society. It was a lesson I wanted to share with everyone. In no time at all, I got my chance. In Alabama, a black woman named Rosa Parks was told to give up her bus seat to a white man. It was just like what happened to me. But unlike me, Mrs. Parks refused. She was arrested. Early the next morning, I got a phone call from a local community leader. "It's time to take a stand. We should boycott the buses so everyone knows that we won't accept this treatment anymore." You know that's not going to be easy. Do not ask if it's easy. Ask if it's right. It was just like Thoreau taught. Instead of using violence to protest the unfair rules, black people would use a peaceful method. We would not ride the public buses. Without our money, the bus companies would go out of business. Now, the only question was, would it work? On the first day of the protest, my wife called me to the window. The buses are all empty. It's working. We had to keep going. As the head of the bus boycott, I gave one of the most important speeches of my life. The room was packed. Camera crews were filming. I had only 20 minutes to prepare. I didn't use notes, but by speaking from the heart, I found out how big words can be. We are determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down the water and righteousness like a mighty stream. When the history books are written in the future, somebody will have to say there lived a race of people, a black people, who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights. The police put me in jail saying I was breaking the law. Other folks bombed my house, but instead of using my fists, I kept my calm. Don't you want to fight back? I am a man of nonviolence, and I know that I do not stand alone. We are with you all the way, Reverend. If no one rides those buses, we'll go out of business. You're finally getting that, huh? For more than a full year, every black person in the city, and some white people too, refused to ride the buses. That meant some people had to walk for miles, but they kept going. Uh, but they kept going. There was a power in standing together. Eventually, our peaceful protests worked. The rules were changed. Public buses could no longer separate people based on the color of their skin. That was only the beginning. Soon, our peaceful protests sparked other peaceful protests. At lunch counters, college students organized sit ins where they would not stop until everyone could eat together. Our methods of nonviolence were so powerful, I was invited to meet with the president at the White House. But sometimes the hardest problems were right at home. Daddy, look, an amusement park. Please, can we go? I'm sorry, Yoki, we can't. Funtown is not open to black people. Seeing my daughter cry was one of the most painful moments of my life. It only made me work harder for change. Was it easy? Absolutely not. During one protest in Birmingham, Alabama, the police again arrested me and locked me in a dark jail cell that had only one window. Someone slipped me a newspaper in which white religious leaders had written an article calling us lawbreakers. Someone snuck me a pen. In that jail cell, I wrote my response in the margins of the newspaper and even on the toilet paper. My letter from Birmingham jail was soon published as a pamphlet. Then it was in magazines and newspapers. Today, it has been read by millions of people. Like I said, it is amazing how big words can be. Our message was so important that even kids your age joined us. In Birmingham, during the Children's Crusade, more than 1,000 kids, some as young as 6 years old, showed up to march. What do you want? Feed 'em. The first day, the police arrested 900 of them. The next day, 2,500 children showed up, ready to go to jail. This was our finest hour. Enraged that we were not giving up, the chief of police told the firemen to spray the children with water hoses and attack them with dogs. They thought it would stop us, but instead, as the whole country watched on TV what they were doing to our children, it was a wake-up call for the nation's conscience. How can they treat little kids like that? That's not right. We need to help them. 90 days later, the rules began to change. Now, blacks and whites in Birmingham were using the same lunch counters, water fountains, and restrooms. You could feel it in the air. More change was coming. Freedom was contagious. By the summer of 1963, an estimated 1 million Americans held their own protests in cities across the country. A man named A. Philip Randolph suggested a massive march. If we march together peacefully, they won't be able to ignore us. Together, we can convince Congress and the president to pass laws so that no one in America can treat people differently based on skin color. I like the idea. Where should we have it? There's only one place. People came from almost every state. They came in nearly every form of transportation. They even took off work and did not get paid just to be there. Old people, young people, black people, white people, even children like you. They all came to Washington, D.C., gathering in a righteous army. Why? Because they wanted change, and they knew the surest way to change the world is to stand together. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. On August 28th, 1963, I stood at the podium and spoke what some later called my biggest words of all. It's just telling us that this is the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I have a dream that my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. Let freedom ring. From every mountaintop, let freedom ring. After the March on Washington, the President and Congress passed new laws for civil rights, but that didn't mean our work was done. Indeed, our greatest battle was still to come. It began with 600 activists as they tried to walk 54 miles from Selma, Alabama to the state capital of Montgomery. Back then, there were rules that stopped black people from voting. If you want change the laws, you have to be able to vote new people to make those laws. We're marching to the governor. We want voting rights. This brutality must end. No matter what, don't let them pass. The police had billy clubs and tear gas. They attacked our group and knocked many people down. But, as I learned so long ago, you have to get back up. No matter how hard they hit us, we remained peaceful. Still, we didn't get through. 2 days later, we tried again. Now there were 2,500 of us. We will get to Montgomery. No, you won't. I promise you won't. Once again, we tried. Once again, we did not get through. Did we give up? What do you think? It was Sunday, March 21st, 1965, our third try. Now we had 8,000 people with us. We are on the move. We shall overcome. For 2 days we marched. Rain could not stop us. The world was watching. The White House was too. President Johnson even sent troops to protect us. Check out the crowd. Black, white, Christian, Jewish, all standing together. Exhaustion could not stop us. As we reached Montgomery, Alabama, tears were shed. But this time, they were tears of joy. In my life, people tried to tell me I wasn't as good as they were just because of the color of my skin. When someone hurts you like that, it can be tempting to hurt them back. You must refuse. When someone shows you hate, show them love. When someone shows you violence, show them kindness. To reach our goals, we must walk the path of peace. We must lock arms with our brothers and sisters. We must march together. When we do, our voices will be heard and freedom will ring. Remember Funtown, the Funtown Amusement Park? Its doors eventually opened to black people, and Dr. King got to take his daughter. Do you know that he was the youngest person to win the Nobel Peace Prize at that time? Just 35 years old. He donated the prize money to the civil rights movement. He said that the prize was the work of many other unsung heroes. He fought against poverty, too. There's even a national holiday for him on the third Monday every January. Only Washington and Lincoln get a day like that, and they share theirs. It's a day to remember how far we've come and how much more work there is to do. I am Martin Luther King Jr. I stand for peace. I stand for justice. I stand to help others. I stand as proof that no matter how hard the struggle, we must fight for what is right and work to change what is wrong. Whatever struggle you face, no matter how hard it gets, you must always move forward. I am proof of this. If we rise up, if we stand together, if we remain united, nothing can stop our dream. The time is always right to do right. Martin Luther King Jr. So the back of the book here has a timeline which is interesting because that's what we're going to be creating too. And it's got some pictures of Dr. King and his family on here as well. I really like that book. I think it does a good job of explaining who he was and what he did in a way that all of us can understand. So let me share my screen again. All right. So just thinking through what we just saw, can anybody unmute and tell me what's one thing that you learned about Dr. Martin Luther King and his work? You could also put it in the chat if you'd like.
I didn't know about um, one of the first events that I didn't know that he was only 19 when he went into the ministry.
Yeah, it's
That
pretty
is
amazing.
very, very early.
Yeah, 15 when he graduated college. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, very, very smart man.
Mhm.
Oops.
I would, that's funny because I was also surprised at the same age of his start into ministry, which was incredible.
Yeah, yeah, it is pretty amazing that he could do all those things.
Mhm.
Um, how about the illustrations? What did you think about the illustrations in the book? Did they help you understand the story or enjoy the story more than you might have without the illustrations? Yeah, see a lot of yeah. I really like the.
I,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. I liked that he didn't age on each page. The illustrator chose to keep him as a child all the way through to the end. I thought that was cute.
I did too.
Um,
In fact, I was just gonna say that. I really love, that we're meeting him as a child, and I think the author wants us to remember that it's his experiences as a child that made him the man that he became. That's great.
mhm, mhm.
I liked the story and the speech bubbles both. Like I
Yeah,
like how they
Mhm.
both tied in together. Mhm.
yeah, I like that too. That's neat, and it flows really well too. It's not like the speech bubbles are separate from the narrative. What about he talks about words a lot in the book. He says when he's a kid that he's going to have big words. So why do you think Dr. King's actions and words were so powerful? Any ideas?
Well, I think they were powerful because he didn't give any reason for anyone to say that um, what they were doing was wrong. There was no violence used ever in his protestations, and he was smart enough to find those moments that he could use to make it real. And he couldn't have done it without the people either. It was the boycott that started it, and the if the people weren't ready for it, his words would have been meaningless,
Yeah,
no matter how big they were.
that's a
So
great
he
point.
was in the right place at the right time, and he gave the right message. You can always look at his the counterpart of Malcolm X and how vastly different their approaches are, or were, I should say.
Yeah, that's a great answer,
Yeah, I
Rebecca.
thought about the kindness part because there are so many violent protests and there are so many unkind protests. And he even said, right, like we use kindness. And so I thought that was really cool.
I like the way that, can you guys hear me? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, we're
Yes.
having technical. Okay. I like the way that in the beginning, like any other person, he kind of questioned, hey, this isn't fair. Hey, this isn't right. But he really stood by his parents' words, which were, no, we treat them with kindness, we love them. And then that kind of messaged went throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah, very good. I really there's one point in the book where he's talking about his speech for the Montgomery bus boycott, and he makes the point that he didn't prepare anything. He was really speaking from the heart, and I think that's part of it too. Even though he was a great writer, and um, I think everything that he said was coming out of experience. And I think that's one of the things that the book shows us as well. All right, great. So we are going to move on to our activity. So uh I'm going to do a little guided practice with you guys first to show you what you need to do with the timeline, and then I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to do your own. But the activity is we're going to use what we learned in the biography, because one of the great things about biography is what you learn about people. And timelines are a good tool that we can use to organize things. So people that are good at critical thinking organize the information that they read. So I put the directions over on the side of this slide, and I am actually going to put uh, a copy of this slide in the chat so you guys can have your own copy. So I'm going to go ahead and have you guys click on that link there and open up your own copy of this timeline template that I have. Yours is going to look a little different than mine, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Let's go ahead and open that up. Everybody able to get there? Okay. We all good?
Getting there.
Okay.
My difficulties are following me all day. Sorry.
It's okay. You could also do it on a piece of paper if you wanted as well.
Okay, I'm in.
Okay. All right. So the directions over here say you're going to choose two events from Martin Luther King Jr.'s life from the book that we read, and you're going to add it to your timeline. You're going to identify and briefly describe the event in the boxes on the timeline. And that could be really short, just like one sentence or something. And then you're going to move the boxes to make sure your events are in chronological order. And then for each event, you're going to find a visual from the internet to paste above your description. So I started with his birth, because one thing that book doesn't tell us in the narrative is when he was born. So Martin Luther King was born on January 15th, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. That is in the timeline. That's at the end of the book. But then I thought, okay, what were some of the events that we learned about in the biography? And one of them that came to mind for me was the March on Washington. So I took one of the boxes, and I wrote in there March on Washington and just gave a short sentence about what it was. So March on Washington, MLK gives I have a dream speech about equality for all people. And then I went on the internet and I found a picture from the March on Washington, and I pasted it on there. So that's what you guys are going to do as well. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do it. Since you're going to have two, once you get them on there, you might have to move your pictures and your boxes around just to make sure that they're in the right order. If you don't know the date of when the event happened, that's fine. Just put them in the order that they happen chronologically, because we don't always know dates. But timelines can still be good for organizing information, even if we don't have dates. Or you could look it up on the internet as well. So I'm going to give you guys about 2 or 3 minutes to do this, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to have you share just what the events were that you chose in the chat after you're done working on it. So if you're having any trouble, let me know. You can unmute or you can ask me questions in the chat, and let me know if you have any questions. So about 2 or 3 minutes here. And just while you guys are working, if you happen to get done early on the slideshow that I gave you, there are some ideas for further study and some extensions listed as well. So you could try to look at those things, or at another time you could look into some of these other ideas. Everybody still doing all right? Anybody need any help with anything?
Yeah, I lost.
Is everybody able to get at least one event down? Yeah. Okay. It's like Simone had to step away for a minute. Well,
Sorry.
Simone, were you able to get at least one down?
I got one down. I was just trying to post a picture, but I lost the document when I minimized it. So let's see if I can get it in. There it is. Okay.
All right. Well, just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and if as long as you got one in, we can use that for our discussion
Sure.
here. So just kind of wrapping up the lesson here, okay? So first thing I want to know is what items did you add to your timeline, or if you weren't able to get both of them on there, if you had an idea of what you were going to put on there, I'd like you guys to share. So Elias, you want to go first?
Sure. So I started off by, of course, his birth was already there. So then in my second box, I thought it was really important to his life story to start where he faced early discrimination from his friend and his friend's father, and that his parents told him the only response to the way to respond to that situation was through love and nonviolence. So I thought that was important to include in mine. And then the second one was the arrest of Rosa Parks, since that was a catalyst to him giving his speech, leading these nonviolent protests. So those were the two that I thought were important.
Great, good job. All right, Rebecca, you want to go?
So I picked the second one, like Elias did, that he couldn't play with his friend anymore, and I found a picture of him as a child, and then I put his ordination on February 25th, 1948, as a minister, and I found a picture of him being ordained.
Great, good job. Simone?
I started to put down his early experience, but changed my mind and went straight to the bus boycott as the catalyst. I didn't get the time frame, but I did find a nice picture from Wikipedia that was, open source. So um, got that. The second image, if I'd had the time, would have been the "I Have a Dream" speech.
So I think it's interesting, one, that you all thought about one of the same events. So I do think that early event in his life is something that was really motivating for him. I think it was important. So I think it's interesting that you all thought of that one at first, but also that you also all came up with different ones as well. There was a lot in that. It's a small children's book, but there's a lot of information in there. Great job. So, just to wrap up here, going back to our key points. So, biographies are accounts of someone's life. They usually highlight a person's achievements, their challenges, and impacts on the world. They're a really great place to learn about people that have shaped the world, like we started with our warm up today. There is one last thing that I would like you guys to do. So on your slideshow that you opened yourself that you guys were working on, there's a link, and if you click on the red link here, it's going to take you to a Google form, and it's just a 4 question exit ticket, asking some questions about the biography genre. So I'm going to have you go ahead and do that. Right before we wrap up here. And I want to thank you guys for being good students for me. I enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed listening to the book and learning about biographies.
Thank, thank you.
Oops.